Welcome to episode 207 of the Various and Sundry podcast. I'm your host, Matt Harmon, joined live from our virtual studio on the internet by my good friend, my colleague, my co-host, and the man who is playing hurt today, John Scott Sloat.
I'm like a good 95%. I'm back, baby. You know, as George Costanza would say.
Indeed, yes. Pre-show, we were just talking about the inability of your household to stay and get and stay healthy recently.
Yeah, lingering coughs, headaches. Who knows what causes them? But perhaps it's just the holiday sullens. Who knows?
Yeah.
We've been struggling the last couple of weeks to be healthy.
Well, and then today, as we record on this lovely Monday afternoon, we've been told a small snow apocalypse is on the way, at least for here in Winona Lake, 4 to 8 inches. And yet I'm skeptical that's actually going to happen.
4 to 8 inches is a pretty big range.
It is.
8 inches feels like 4 inches feels like that's a moderate amount of snow, moderate, right?
Yeah.
8 inches, you dread the shoveling prospect. You know, it's just like you're just like, this is just going to be terrible.
Yeah. So I feel like 4 inches and below, especially when the weather's going to be warmer these next couple days, I don't bother shoveling.
You just let it melt.
Just let it melt. It's fine. It'll be fine. You get to that 6 to 8 though, and you're like, well, I don't know. Maybe getting the snowblower out isn't the bad idea. Yeah. See, I can't remember if I mentioned this on the pod before, but
you have a snowblower.
I do have a snowblower, but it's not mine.
Right. It's your neighbor's.
It's my neighbor's. And so he lets me use it and house it with the understanding that I will do his driveway as well. He's like an upper 70s, early 80s, probably upper 70s guy.
Okay.
So, it actually started off as Kate and I just shoveling his driveway when we went out to shovel, to be kind. And he came out one day and he's like, I've got an old snowblower. How about I give that to you and you can just use it and then just make sure you do my driveway? Okay, sure. But it is a beast. I mean, it's better suited for like big snowfalls.
It's a gas powered.
It is gas powered, yes. Thankfully,
what sort of maintenance do you do on that? Do you change like the carburetor and things like that?
No. We're talking like change the oil.
Okay.
And I have to regularly put air in the tires. Like they're not the plastic, they're like actual like small inflatable tires, not like plastic stuff. So, but it's a beast to operate. Thankfully though, it does have an electric start feature where you plug it into the wall and you plug a cord into the wall, and so that helps start it, which is nice. But it's a bit of a beast, so I don't look forward to using it. I'm grateful to have it, but it's not easy to use.
I have a small snowblower.
Yes, I'm aware. Yes.
A small battery powered, it can't be more than 20 pounds snowblower. And it's great for like I have 2 to 4 inches of snow.
Yeah.
Sort of level. When we get the 10 to 15 inches of snow, it won't work.
Yeah.
And I just do it by hand, which at that point, it's just a workout at that
point. It is for sure. Well, if you'd like to get in touch with the show and tell us about your snow removal experience, you can find us on Twitter at VNSPod. Email the show, variousandsundrypodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook and on YouTube, and we would love for you to leave a 5-star rating and a review on whatever platform you access the show. Ready to talk some sports, John?
Sure.
So, we're basically the only thing happening in college football right now is transfer portal craziness.
Question for you.
Yeah.
When these youths enter the transfer portal and they still have a bowl game to go, do they play in that bowl game or do they not play in that bowl game?
They do not.
Okay. So a lot of these teams are going to be missing guys, right? Because I mean,
yes,
a lot of people have entered this portal.
Yes. Yeah. So I think Ohio State has had 13 or 14, and Georgia has had like 14 or 15. And so, yeah, these players don't end up playing in the bowl game. Part of it is just the nature of there's only a limited window as to when the transfer portal is open, and it's before the bowl games. So
that seems silly.
It's dumb, but it's the NCAA, and they specialize in dumb. So it's it has to be. I understand that there are more corrupt sports agencies out there, but I don't know that there's a more incompetent one than the NCAA. I'd be hard pressed to think of one that is worse run than the NCAA. But in any case,
that would be a fun summer topic. Which is the worst run sports league? Maybe the NCAA is its own thing.
Yeah.
And then you go, MLB, NFL, NBA. And we try to rank them.
That would appeal to a certain demographic in our audience, but not another part of our audience.
That's true. That's true.
That might be a sports segment conversation as opposed to a main topic one.
Maybe around the All-Star break this summer when we're struggling for sports topics.
There you go. Yeah. And when there's not enough cricket news to carry us. So, all right, John, I know you've been so looking forward to talking about this, but tell us about your Jets.
Yeah. They just can't seem to figure out the Dolphins. It was a bad game. I think in the first quarter, Zach Wilson was pressured 10 times or something ridiculous like that. And ultimately got knocked out of the game, which at first it was reported that he was dehydrated and was knocked out of the game. And that, which is not knocked out of the game, by the way. But, and then it was reported, well, he has a wrist injury. And then it was, well, it's his head, but not a concussion. And then by like the fourth quarter, it was like, Zach Wilson has a concussion. Like, what a terrible rollout of information from the Jets locker room. What a miserable mess.
But who is that on? That's not on the medical staff, is it?
No, that's probably on the PR staff or something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
You could just say he's out.
Well, but in the NFL, aren't there rules about you have to disclose the nature of injuries? In college football, you don't.
Maybe. Maybe. Do you have to disclose like in the moment what the injury is? Like that would be my question. I know in like the injury report you would.
Yeah.
But
I
imagine in the moment you don't have to. I mean, you could have called it an upper body injury.
Yeah.
And left. That's what hockey does. I remember hockey was always just like, yeah, so-and-so has a lower body injury, and whatever that means,
Yeah. Thanks for narrowing it down. You've cut it in half. Well done.
Yes. But yeah, it's just a disappointing season. I think a lot of it lands on the coaching staff and the GM for not putting together a great offensive line, albeit injuries, but injuries happen to everybody.
Right.
And a team that I compare them to are they're similar to the Browns, right? The Browns and the Jets both have great defenses. Both lost their quarterbacks, and one has been able to stitch together wins, and one has not.
Yeah,
and I think that fall, and they both had a ton of injuries to their offensive line, and the Browns have been able to put together W's like yesterday.
Yeah,
albeit barely putting together a win yesterday. Nearly lost to the Bears.
Yes. Yeah, there's a game where you could make the case they probably should have lost.
A couple of times, yeah.
I mean, and it feels like this happens a decent bit to the Bears. They get in games, they're close, and then something happens where maybe make a mistake or just don't have a play go their way. I mean, um, you
Early in the
think,
game, there was a big drop.
oh,
Justin
huge,
Fields rolls out, and I don't know, as our wide receiver had 3 yards on the D back or something like that,
easily.
and just it just bounced off his hands.
Yeah,
And
there was you could not have placed the ball any better if you were standing next to him and it just he just dropped it.
yeah,
Um, so I don't know what to make of the Bears. I think see I'm kind of torn. I want Justin Fields to do well, and so part of me just wants the Bears to move on and for Justin Fields to go somewhere else where he'll have a chance to actually be developed and play with some better wide receivers and see what he can do.
mm-hmm.
Because the Bears have been historically terrible at developing quarterbacks. It is a quarterback graveyard. And so, it's not even just this current coaching staff. There's just something systemic in the organization that doesn't know how to draft and develop quarterbacks.
Yeah, oh yeah,
So, but shout out to the Browns, 9-5,
shocking.
despite making one of the worst trades in NFL history for Deshaun Watson.
Mm-hmm.
Like that one is going to go down as one of the worst trades that that's happened in the NFL ever.
Oh yeah,
Based on all that they gave up to get Deshaun Watson, a guy who has played what 5, 6 games for him this year and had to
and
miss last year because of most of last year because of a what was it, like a 10-game suspension.
yeah, and even when he's played, he's been mediocre
Yeah,
at best. He hasn't been great.
no,
Um, so I would love to see the Bears send Justin Fields to the Jets and have him back up Aaron Rodgers for a year, and then he can take the reins. I like that idea. I think that sounds wonderful. Got to be better than
yeah.
Normanville.
I mean, he's definitely um he'd be reunited with one of his college receivers, Garrett Wilson.
Yep, yep. And with the Jets draft pick, it's a good chance they get another Ohio State player.
Sure.
As much as you would hate that.
Look, I just want Ohio State guys to do well in the league.
Uh,
I don't hate the Jets. It's that too many Ohio State players have gone to the Jets and just kind of petered out, like not lived up to expectations. And so it's hard sometimes to know how much of that is the organization and how much of that is maybe the player was honestly overrated. I don't know.
by the way, Garrett Wilson was not targeted until the third quarter yesterday.
Yeah, that seems like
That's a problem. That's a
that
problem.
seems like a good idea. I mean, why would you want to target your best offensive player, arguably? Why would you want to get him the ball? That's crazy.
Give him a screen pass. I mean, just like
Yeah,
snap the ball and
something.
throw it to him.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
Anyway.
And then the Bills put it to the Cowboys yesterday. That was another
that was
semi-surprising. Yeah.
Wonder if it's a little bit of a letdown from the Cowboys after beating the Eagles last week,
I don't know what to make of the Cowboys. I do think the Bills have figured some things out. So I think they've turned a corner, I think, and they will. I think by the time the postseason rolls around, they'll be a dangerous team.
If they get there. I mean, I don't think they have a winning record yet.
I think they're. Are they not even now?
They're 8-6. I'm wrong.
Okay.
Wrong. It was 2 weeks ago that they were 500.
Yeah, they're right in the mix there. I don't know if I can't remember if it's one of those. If the playoffs started today, would they be in? I can't remember. I think they're on the outside looking in still.
Yeah, the Browns, Bengals, and Colts would be in, and the Bills would be on the outside.
I still really like the Bills' chances of moving into the playoffs with how they're playing.
Yep, agreed. They got a good quarterback, better than any of those 3 teams.
Yeah, have you paid attention to the Knicks at all?
Yes, Knicks are. I mean, they're off to a pretty good start. They're probably winning 2 games and then losing a game. That's they win a couple
Yeah.
games, they lose a game, they win 3 games, they lose 2 games. That's sort of their rhythm right now. I mean, Jalen Brunson had 50 points against the Suns the other day. And that was a very, very good game. The Knicks right now are sitting in the 6th seed right now. So that's where you want to be, 6th seed and up, outside of that play-in.
Yep.
So, I mean, overall, pretty pleased with that for the start of the season.
Okay.
Still early. We'll
Very
see what
early.
happens.
Yep. One of the bigger NBA stories, though, is arguably my least favorite player in the entire league, Draymond Green, suspended indefinitely. Have you seen this?
Yeah, that was weird. I saw that he was in some sort of altercation, but it feels like you could say that every night.
Well, this is definitely a cumulative sort of I mean, this was pretty egregious though. He took a very clear swing at a guy and hit him in the face. And yeah, it's just the accumulation of a lot of things. And so basically the league is like, we're going to force you to get counseling and get your head right before we let you back. So that's why it's indefinite. It wasn't specified a number of games.
I did get a push notification on my phone today that he has begun counseling.
Can you imagine sitting in those counseling sessions with Draymond Green?
Who do you hire for that? Who's his counselor?
I don't know.
And is it a biblical counselor?
I highly doubt that. Highly doubt that. Anyway, you ready to move on, John?
Sure.
All right. We are wrapping up our Advent series today. We've been doing a series of episodes on different Old Testament allusions and citations in the nativity stories as a way of maybe shedding some new light on what's going on there. And so today's text is not strictly, it's still in Matthew's, you could call it the nativity account. Really, I think of those first 2 chapters in Matthew and the first 2 chapters in Luke as essentially the nativity stories.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to deal with one that is actually a pretty famous example of a seemingly at first strange Old Testament citation in the New Testament. We're going to look at Matthew chapter 2, verses 12 through 15, which at the end of it quotes Hosea 11:1. And so let's start. John, would you be willing to read Matthew 2, 12 through 15 for us there?
Sure. Starting in verse 12. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. Now, when they departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, Rise, take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt and remain there until I tell you. For Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him. And he rose and took the child and his mother by night and departed to Egypt and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet. Out of Egypt I called my son.
Okay, so this is actually taking place sometime after the birth of Jesus. And you've got the wise men being warned. Though I have to think, surely they were suspicious of Herod to begin with. But in any case,
they are wise men at the end of the day.
Yeah, it would seem odd if they weren't a little suspicious about Herod's motives in saying, yeah, go find the kid and then let me know where he is because I want to worship him too. Like, yeah, come on. Just not the most believable story.
Absolutely.
And so eventually at some point, Herod realizes that he's been he's been tricked. But before that, you've got this account here of an angel appearing to Joseph in a dream, saying basically, get out of town and head to Egypt because Herod's going to uh, try to kill your kid. And the sort of um, the key explanation given here is there at the end of verse 15. And what's noteworthy is it's introduced explicitly with with fulfillment language. This was to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet. So this is no like indirect um indirect allusion here. This is a direct citation, and Matthew's drawing your attention to it by using this sort of introductory formula. Um, Anything else from the context here of Matthew 1 and 2 that you want to highlight, John, before we jump back to look at what's going on in Hosea there?
Um, why? So I don't know the answer to this. Why Egypt specifically? Like why not Tarsus? Why not Rome? Why not why specifically Egypt? Obviously to fulfill this prophecy.
Mm-hmm.
But was there a large contingent of Jewish nationals there? Was like what why any idea why specifically Egypt?
I'd say setting aside for a minute the fulfillment of prophecy, but
Sure.
I would say two things. One is proximity, that from Bethlehem, uh, probably one of the easiest places to get to safety would be Egypt.
Okay, so just shortness of trip, sort of an idea.
There's certainly that, but then there's also, I think, as you mentioned, there was a sizable Jewish population, especially in the city of Alexandria.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know where in Egypt he went. So who knows? But it would have been feasible for his family to essentially just kind of blend in, disappear, and kind of get lost in the crowd, so to speak.
Yeah, interesting. Hmm. Um. Yeah, I think that's all the questions I have here.
Sure. I will mention one other thing that's relevant to this particular citation is that, and I don't have time to necessarily walk us through this, but I think within the first several chapters of Matthew, one of the things that Matthew is doing is he is trying to show you how Jesus relives Israel's experiences, but obeys where Israel had failed as a nation. And this is really the earliest indicator of this particular text we're looking at today. But it pops up several times more in chapters 3 and 4. For example, in chapter 3, you've got the baptism, which kind of echoes Israel's passing through the waters at the Red Sea. You've got the temptation account in Matthew 4,
In the
which
wilderness.
in the
Yeah.
wilderness,
Mm-hmm.
which is uh, in one sense structured in part at least by not just the three temptations, but also Old Testament citations that draw upon Israel's wandering in the wilderness and failing, and yet Jesus defeats the serpent in the wilderness here. And so, and there are others as well. I've made this case probably most clearly in, I think, in one of my chapters in Making All Things New, the book I wrote with Ben Glad. But in any case, that's relevant to understand here that this Matthew 2 citation is part of this larger program that Matthew's trying to show us how Jesus is reliving Israel's experiences and obeying where Israel failed.
In broad strokes sort of way, though. So leaving Canaan and coming down into Egypt, kind of echoing their slavery there, and then coming up, passing through the waters of baptism, so on and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. And then even when you get into chapter 4, this is one that's not as readily noticed, but in chapter 4, uh, when Jesus is when Jesus enters the land, there's even, I think, there a picture of he's entering the land and um, engaging in conquest by defeating evil powers and gaining followers.
Hmm.
Uh, but in any case, so that's the sort of the backdrop. Let's look at Hosea 11 to see, because when you read Matthew 2, one of the things that you would expect, I think, is based on the way Matthew frames it. When you go back to to Hosea 11, I think what you naturally would expect is something that sounds like a promise, right?
Yeah, yeah. You expect it to be an explicit, like, hey, announcement, this is going to happen in the future, sort of an
Correct.
idea.
Yeah, yeah. So, so why don't we let's just read Hosea 11. Uh, let's do 1 and 2, I guess. Let's just do that.
Okay. So Hosea chapter 11, verse 1 and 2. When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. The more they were called, the more they went away. They kept sacrificing to the Baals and burning offerings to idols.
So that's just a snapshot, but really, so you go back to that and you look at that and you go, oh, okay, so Matthew is quoting from Hosea 11:1, the out of Egypt I called my son. What's interesting though is that when you look at the first line of Hosea 11:1, it's when Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. So the son in view in Hosea 11:1 is unambiguously Israel.
Yep.
There's no debate about that. And what's further noteworthy is that this is not a prediction as one would have expected. It's a statement of a historical fact. It's simply looking back to the Exodus and going, this happened.
Yeah, yeah. And the Exodus refers to Israel as God's son, in the original Exodus as well.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, uh, when you go back to Exodus chapter 4, when uh, God is explaining to Moses what he's supposed to do when he appears before Pharaoh, these are some definitive words that you get with um, God instructing Moses, hey, this is what you're supposed to do. He says in Exodus 4:22, starting in verse 22, yes. Then you shall say to Pharaoh, thus says the Lord, Israel is my firstborn son. And I say to you, let my son go, that he may serve me. If you refuse to let him go behold, I will kill your firstborn son. So the identification of Israel as God's son is not new, surprising, shocking. Every, every Jewish person who heard Hosea 11:1 would have been like, well, yeah, duh, of course.
Yeah.
Israel as a nation is God's son. So here's the question though. How can Matthew look at a text in Hosea 11:1 that is a description of a historical event and say that that historical event finds its fulfillment in Jesus? A historical event about the nation of Israel. How does that historical event find its fulfillment in the person of Jesus?
Well,
And I know you know the answer to this because you took my New Testament theology class many moons ago.
Yes, yes. And well, we've had a lot of conversation since then. Um, the other thing we didn't necessarily get to this in Hosea, but the second verse talks about nothing but about how they just simply fail.
Yeah.
How they continually, the more I call them, the more they go away.
Yeah.
The more they rebel against me. And in a sense, Jesus is going to be the greater and perfect Israel that Israel failed to be.
Yeah.
Fair, is that a fair assessment there?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, I mean, I think this is a classic example of typology,
Mm-hmm.
that the key category here is son. That what Matthew is saying is that yes, Israel was God's son. And although Matthew doesn't make this point, Luke does at the end of his genealogy, that Adam was God's son. So you have this category of God's son, and you have a disobedient son, Adam, a disobedient son, Israel. And so now the question is there ever going to be an obedient son? And this is the beginning of that connection in Matthew's gospel, that um, Jesus is going to obey where Israel failed. So in order to do that, he's reliving these experiences. And so the point of connection is it's based on typology, that God designed the nation of Israel as well as Adam, that in their actions that they would anticipate a later and greater son, one who would actually obey and fulfill the commission that both Adam and Israel had. And therefore, that's part of what Matthew is helping us to see here when he pulls this quote from Hosea 11:1 and says, basically, that was anticipating Jesus coming out of Egypt. Israel's coming out of Egypt anticipates Jesus coming out of Egypt.
Now, you mentioned Luke identifying that with Adam. We mentioned earlier that the temptation event is sort of reliving Israel's history in the wilderness. After that genealogy in Luke, identifying Jesus, Jesus and connecting Jesus to Adam, there's also the temptation narrative that immediately comes after that.
Correct.
That seems so much more focused on, as far as I could tell, Adam's temptation in the garden and not Israel's temptation, but the same event in Jesus's life. Am I making fair statements here?
That might be a little overstated. I think if you just had Matthew's account, you would see that as, oh, Jesus is obeying where the nation of Israel failed. But the fact that Luke puts the genealogy right in front of it, and that genealogy concludes with basically son of Adam, son of God, identifying Adam as the son of God, as a son of God, then introduces the temptation narrative. I think that puts a sort of more Adam-like hue over the temptation narrative in Luke, even though Luke uses, I mean, the order of the temptations is slightly different, but it's the same Old Testament quotes that are in there, right? And those are taken from Deuteronomy. Two of them are taken from Deuteronomy 8. One of them is taken from Deuteronomy 6, both of which are talking about Israel's experiences in the wilderness and failing. So it's sort of, I see the Luke one as more of a both and, yeah.
Interesting.
So, but yeah, so even this quote here in Matthew 2 from Hosea 11 is setting you up to understand Jesus as God's son, as the obedient son, the one who obeys where Israel failed. And that's, I think, one of the main reasons why you have Matthew doing this, introducing this category here, because it's so important for the rest of his gospel account. But that's not where the theme ends in one sense of sonship. And that's part of what's beautiful about this text is it doesn't just stop with Jesus. It's not like, oh, good, God's ultimate son, Jesus, comes along, and that's it, because this gets extended on to believers
Mm-hmm.
later on in Scripture. Um, for example, if you look in Galatians 4, not surprising we end up in Galatians if you're talking with me, but um, Galatians 4 is, I think, a well-known text that really makes this connection explicit. Um, Galatians 4, get there here. Do you have it?
I sure do. Which verse?
We're going to read verses 4 through 7.
Okay, Galatians 4, 4 to 7. But when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law, so that we might receive adoption as sons. And because you are sons, God has sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, crying, Abba, Father. So you are no longer a slave, but a son. And if a son, then an heir through God.
Yeah, so that's part of the beauty of this theme of sonship that runs throughout the scriptures, is that all who are identified with Jesus then are adopted as sons into his family, and get to share in his inheritance. And part of what's beautiful about that as well is that we are considered obedient sons, not because of our own actions, but because of what Jesus has done for us.
Hmm.
And even just that language of that God has sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts. So it's not even, you could look at that potentially and go, oh, that's just a very kind of legal kind of terminology, right?
Mm-hmm.
Adoption, inheritance, that's all legal language, especially in the first century world.
Sure.
But sending the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, there's nothing legal about that in the sense of like just pure, judicial terminology. That's intimacy, that's closeness, that's fellowship. And that gets at the beauty of part of the beauty of the gospel. And that's one of the reasons why J.I. Packer used to love to say that adoption is the ultimate blessing of the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
It's because God could have just declared us not guilty of our sins, justification, and then just
Sure.
said, okay, you're free to go. But he adopts us into his family. There's a sense of familial identity that comes with that goes way beyond just being acquitted in a court of law, as central and foundational as that is. Anything else that you want to hit on this sonship theme, connecting back to Matthew 2?
I don't think so. This is putting in my mind, though, and this is maybe a conversation for another time, a podcast series through tracing Jesus and Israel, sort of Jesus reliving some of those footsteps would be an interesting series to work through, but that's for another time.
There you go. Yeah, let's put that on the discussion.
Yeah.
We'll see where that goes. All right, John, time now for this day in sports history.
All right, this day in sports history, December 19th. We are crawling to Christmas here.
We only have one more episode after this in the year 2023.
That's wild. It. All right, December 19th. December 19th, 1984, Scotty Bowman wins his 691st regular season game, the most wins by any coach in NHL history.
We don't get a lot of NHL references on here, so thought
we don't outside of Wayne Gretzky, and I think we had one Mario Lemieux. I want to say
could have been. I'm sure.
There's some. By the way, there's some great hockey names that are out there. The Rangers had a wing called Adam Graves.
Yeah.
There was a defenseman for the Rangers in the 90s called Buka Boom. One of my favorite named athletes of all time. Anyway, 1986. Michael Sergio, who parachuted in the Shea Stadium during Game 6 of the World Series was sentenced to 100 hours of community service and fined $500.
Have you heard of this? Obviously, you weren't alive, but
Worth it. Absolutely worth it.
yeah.
There's the 30 for 30 on the 86 Mets. I can't remember the specific name of it, but they show this video and talk about it.
Hilarious.
They talk about a lot of things in the 86 Mets.
Yeah.
2000 Ballon d'Or. I think I'm getting that right. Real Madrid's Portuguese midfielder Luis Figo is named best football player in Europe ahead of Juventus midfielder Zinedine Zidane and Milan striker Andriy Shevchenko.
Close.
I think I did better than I anticipated stepping into that sentence.
Maybe. Yeah. Zinedine Zidane, I think.
Zinedine Zidane. He was the French guy that four-headed somebody in the chest in the World Cup in 2000. Yes. Was that 2010?
Something around there. And then Andriy
maybe
Shevchenko, I think. Yeah. Some great names there.
Yeah. 2006. That previous one, I'm not even quite sure what happened there. Just a string of names. But 2006, the 76ers traded Allen Iverson to the Nuggets for Andre Miller, Joe Smith, and future draft picks, Daquan Cook and Pateri Kopenin. I'm not familiar with him. The trade came 2 weeks after AI demanded a trade and one day after Melo was suspended for 15 games for the Knicks brawl.
Do you remember that? The brawl?
I don't remember the brawl. No.
I don't either.
No, I don't remember that.
It was 2006. You would have been what, like 16?
18. That was the year I graduated high school. 2010, Miracle at the Meadowlands.
At the new Meadowlands.
Excuse me. Philadelphia Eagles trail the Giants by 21 points with 8 minutes to play before scoring 4 touchdowns in the final 7 minutes, including a dramatic walk-off punt return for a touchdown by Deshaun Jackson. I remember that.
I do too. And the insanity of
punting to Deshaun Jackson.
Yeah, just kick the ball out of bounds, dude.
He was so good. At his prime, he was so good.
He was amazing, yeah.
2018, Houston Rockets set NBA single-game record with 26 three-pointers in a 136-118 victory over the Washington Wizards. 8 players hit from deep as the Rockets shoot 26 of 55. James Harden leads charge shooting 6 of 11 on threes.
26 made three-pointers.
That's a lot of three-pointers. 55 is a lot to take, though.
Yeah, but I mean, if you shoot 47% from three-point range,
you should keep shooting.
Yes.
Yes. Agreed. Who do you like?
Oh, goodness. Man. I don't want to go with the Rockets. Not a soccer guy, so we can probably skip the
yeah, that one's in there for the names. We all know that.
Yep. So I could go with Deshaun Watson, Allen Iverson, or
you mean Deshaun Jackson?
Who'd I say? Deshaun Watson?
You said Watson. Yeah.
Sorry. Deshaun Jackson.
Browns on the brain.
There you go. Allen Iverson. Or I could go with Michael Sergio.
I'm as much as I like Michael Sergio, I think 4 touchdowns in 7 minutes is pretty impressive.
Okay. So we're gonna go the Miracle at the New Meadowlands.
Yeah.
All right. One thing you liked.
Black Friday this year, I purchased a lifetime subscription to Dwell Bible Audio at a discounted price. So I have been enjoying the lovely tones of readers, the readers over there at Dwell Bible.
Do you have a favorite?
I've been mixing it up. I haven't landed on anybody yet. So right now I'm with Rosie in the UK.
Okay.
Reading to me. I definitely like the non-American accents.
So my wife's favorite is Felix.
Felix? Okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to check it out.
It's an African accent.
South African, I assume?
Yeah. Well, it is an African who sounds British, obviously, since there was so much British,
Sure.
There's plenty of African countries you go and it sounds like they're British because of the way they speak English. But
yeah, most of the English speaking world outside of the United States. Let's be quite real.
Probs. I'm gonna go with the festive Harmon Christmas celebration we had this weekend at our house.
Any unique traditions take place? Any?
Let's see. We don't have any specific like unique traditions, I wouldn't say. Though one tradition that Jake's girlfriend Autumn has now, I think, managed to squeeze into our family is clapping now after gifts. Yes, so
I like it. That's fun.
I was not as big a fan, though my mother was a big fan of this, and so she
really
was an early adopter of this. So yes,
that's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
Yes, but great to have John come up as well, and it was just a very festive day. My wife did an amazing job. She did all the cooking, had a big ham, cheesy potato casserole, green beans, apple crisp, chocolate dessert.
I love it.
I think I mentioned to you our British basement dweller for Christmas got us this massive basket. Did I mention this?
No, I don't think so.
So it's this like huge basket of what started off as, he said, well, I'm going to give you guys a British Christmas. So like different shortbreads and other things that like are kind of traditional British Christmas stuff, including some beverages as well. And then he's like, and then I just realized, well, why just limit it to being a British Christmas when I can make it a European Christmas? And so he's just, it is a massive basket of all sorts of stuff. And so then we dipped into that as well.
Now I know you're talking about food and this is outside the realm of food, but I have always wanted to get to a German Christmas market.
Yeah.
That's on the bucket list. To get to Heidelberg and get to the Christmas. I hear the Christmas market in Heidelberg is tops.
Well, maybe next year you need to convince the whole Sloat family just to make that the Christmas thing.
I love that idea.
But there you go. And that is my one thing I liked. All right, John, we have talked the disappointment that is the New York Football Jets. We have talked about Jesus as God's son being called out of Egypt. Hosea 11:1 quoted in Matthew 2:15. We have talked about the miracle at the new Meadowlands, with the Eagles scoring 4 touchdowns in the last 7 minutes. We've talked about John's favorite voices on the Dwell Bible app. And we've talked about a Harmon family Christmas. And so I think by definition, we have covered our various and sundry topics. So all that's left to say is Merry Christmas and the Lord bless you all real good.
Later.